Free-to-air television is under siege in Ghana. Broadcasting in Ghana has gone digital, but what does it mean for you? Make a date with industry-leading experts on Thursday, the 6th of June at Swiss Spirit's Alisa Hotel, Ridge, Accra, as we discuss the facts and discover the answers in a broadcast media industry forum dubbed Digital Migration in the Future of Free-to-Air Television in Ghana. This event will be chaired by Mr. Roland Afemorning, President of the Ghana Journalists Association. Speakers include Mr. Ernest Kofi Abuchi, a legal practitioner, Suleiman Braiman, Executive Director of the Media Foundation for West Africa, Nana Kwesi Jan Apenting, former Chair of the National Media Commission, Mr. Prince Harry Crystal, Executive Council Member of the Ghana Independent Broadcasters Association, and Mr. Gregory Bensberg, General Manager of Digital 3 and 4, ITV and Channel 4's Digital Terrestrial Services in the UK. In attendance will be members of the Diplomatic Corps, civil society organizations, broadcasters, and allied media service providers, traditional rulers, and representation from the general public. This event will be telecast live on over 200 GIBA member television and radio stations across Ghana. Join our live stream online at www.facebook.com/Ghana Independent Broadcasters Association. The general public is invited to tune in to this telecast, and let's share minds together as we discuss the digital migration process, the way forward, and the crucial role of mass media communication through free-to-air broadcasting.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is how the cookie crumbled. Like I said, it does give some context to where we've come from, where we are, and hopefully this engagement will allow us to chart a new course to the end that we all desire. I'd like to hand over at this point by inviting Mr. Bernard Avler, who is the City Breakfast Show host, as well as the General Manager for City TV and City FM. Let's welcome him with a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Inshira, and good morning or good mid-morning to all our listeners and viewers across the various platforms. This is a very important industry conversation to try and bring clarity to an issue which has very often been obfuscated by technical jargon. And I want to say that even here, we've not been that kind, because I listed over 10 different acronyms? DTT, EPG, FTA, OTT, UHF, VHF, STB. I don't know whether it's STB Macan or STB, the other STB, you know, and then there's FRND. You also added more. And then there's one that I couldn't even understand, NDBMTC. What about these things mean? I don't know. We'll break it down. It's a program that's meant to throw light, so it's not just a panel speaking and talking at you. We have a nice audience who will ask more questions for clarity's sake. So who is on the panel? So some of the speakers are on the panel. So earlier on, we had Prince Crystal. So please come up, put your hands together for him. He's coming up again. He is he's an executive council member of GIBA, and he is a director of operations for Crystal TV, and a commissioner member of the National Media Commission, and he's the chairman of the Legal, Regulatory, and Ethics Committee of GIBA. So great to have you, Prince Harry Crystal. We also have the man who gave the British context and the European angle, Gregory Bensberg. Greg, you need to come back. Thank you very much. He's the general manager and of Digital 3 and 4, and this manages the broadcasting of ITV and Channel 4's digital terrestrial services in the UK. Previously worked as a policy and technical expert at Ofcom. And if you know anything about television regulation in the UK, Ofcom is a very important body. So thank you, Greg, for being here. We also have a legal context. So in analyzing the issue, there's a legal aspect, there's an engineering aspect, there's an economics, market industry structure aspect, and then there's a media freedom aspect. So we're very happy to have, I think, the youngest dean of a law school in anywhere in the world before he became the age he is now. So we still have the record. Kofi Abuchi is also managing partner of Access Legal Solicitors. Kofi, thank you for being here. I want you to be closer to me. I need you to be closer to me so that when the picture is taken, I'll look nice. Kofi, thank you. You are not in bow tie today. You're usually in a bow tie. Kofi, great to have you on the program. And we're privileged to have, as I said, the issue has a very important global context. So access to media is part of media freedom. And indeed, Al Jazeera published an article a couple of days ago about how global media freedom is fading. And some of the country context, it was about whether you can put on your television at all, who controls the space. So media freedom is not just whether a journalist is shot or not. If you can't access TV in an affordable manner, it's media freedom. And because that aspect of the conversation is very important, we invited two heavyweights. So Chairman for Life is here. He is Kwesi Jana-Pintin, who is the Nana Kwesi Jana-Pintin, former chairman of NMC. He's on the panel. Nana, thank you for being here. Thank you very much. Put your hands together for him. And last but not least, we also have the vibrant executive director of the Media Foundation for West Africa in the person of Suleiman Brahma. Suleiman, thank you for being here. You just had your Salah yesterday, so you should be resting, but you are here for God and country. So listeners here and viewers, we want to put the issues in context. So as I said, the industry has legal issues, and law is the foundation for everything. So we need to understand what are the legal issues here. Listening to what the panelists, the speaker said earlier, so there's a process that was kickstarted in 2006. 2010, Cabinet approved something. There's supposed to be a draft policy, but we're seeing or alleging that government is implementing or making announcements drawing from a policy that is draft. Okay, what does that mean? We are told that the body that's going to manage the DTT platform is supposed to have certain composition. We're told that as it stands now, that composition is not properly being followed. And what are the dangers of having a government-controlled manager of a platform that's supposed to be like an arbiter? So those are some of the legal questions we have. And that question in my mind is digital migration a government-led or government-driven process? Government-led. So that government leads but industry determines, or government leads and drives. And I'm looking at the legal guy because you need to set the legal foundations for us. And your own thoughts about the way we are going about all the legal issues here. Then I'm going to come to the industry. Chief, Prince, you need to come back to us, okay? So what government wants to do in terms of, for example, the conditional access within the DTT platform, how is that going to affect the players in the industry? You need to be more specific. Who is going to be affected? Is it the regular TV stations? Is it the device importers? Is it the viewers? How is it going to change the economics of the platform? So how is the policy going to redefine the industry? You need to explain that without any jargons. I don't want any more jargons. I'm tired of your jargons. And I'm going to ask Greg to give us a more sort of softer comparison. Okay, which other countries have done this? How did they do it? Has any country had? I mean, we've missed the deadline like 3 times. Is Ghana an outlier, or this is how it happens everywhere? Because I was somewhere in 2015, I was told the deadline is 2015. Now it's 2020 something. It's maybe 2030. By the time I'm an old man, we've still not migrated. Talk to us a bit about how it happened. And then Nana Kwesi and then Suleiman. I think why we've brought you here is to talk about what this means for independent media. What this means for independent media. So I've said the questions for everybody. Does that make sense? Good. So let me start with Prof. Since law is the foundation for everything. So I want your own observations generally about the issue from a legal perspective. And then if you can answer some of the questions I've asked about, for example, why are we making directives from a policy that we consider to be a draft policy? And things like that. The body that's supposed to manage our digital platform, why is it putting a conditional access in there? Is that going to deprive people of their right to free television? General thoughts. So please put your hands together for Kofi Abuchi again.
Well, clapping for me before speaking is a very dangerous thing to do because you asked me to say something sensible. So it's a murky area, and I think you've actually put it in context. We've been here before. The Constitution was adopted in a certain political context. And the tensions of the 90s resulted in many cases that were alluded to earlier. We've had contests between government and private media houses over the years. Actually, interestingly, the current government was then, as a party in opposition in those days, the party that actually spearheaded many of those decisions. So in an interesting historical twist, we have a situation in which that government, that party in power now, appears to be the one the GIBA is contesting on issues relating to information. So there's some element of historical irony in that area. That is assuming that you indeed have a good case, assuming that GIBA indeed has a good case. Ghana has been here before, and we've had situations where radio stations have been closed down. We've had situations where radio stations have been refused licenses, and we've been back in courts over the years, and I think generally the media space would concede that a lot of progress has been made. We now have a significant migration and a transition that is creating another difficulty. The extent to which we're able to resolve this properly will determine the future of radio and television, and to an extent, even print media in Ghana. So we are in a very important stage as far as the future of radio, television, and print media is concerned. Now, the reason this is important bipartisanly, and I say bipartisanly because whichever party comes into power in future, whether it's the NDC that remains in power, or the NDC comes, or some other unknown party comes, that party will be confronted with the foundations that are laid today. So the prospects that beckons and that awaits every other political party for the future is or may be determined by what is happening today. So that's why this is extremely important. Now, to the question of unpacking the law. I see three key things. The Constitution actually provides in Article 21 that everyone has the right to information. In my opinion, that is a foundation, that is a bedrock. Media provides that information. Whatever spectrum, or rather whatever facility is put in place to, as it were, obstruct that information may therefore ordinarily raise questions for answer. So everyone has the right to information. That's the first one. Now, if you go further into the Constitution under Article 163, impediments to the establishment of media houses are not allowed ordinarily. So if you put that together with the right to information, then one can say that ordinarily, each and everyone has a right to set up a media house, be it radio, television, or print, and that person or entity should not suffer impediment ordinarily, trying to make it as simple as possible. However, there was a decision in our courts when a challenge was brought as to the relevancy or the legality of imposing a licensing requirement to the establishment of the media houses. And the courts, on practical grounds, decided that because there is a limitation to the spectrum, because there's a limitation to the media, I don't know how to describe that, but the spectrum, because there's a limitation to the various media by which information can be transmitted, not everyone can ordinarily just go set up a media house and then so be it. That there must be a minimum licensing regulatory option for the states. So the Supreme Court qualified that right that ordinarily you and I could have to just set up a media house, so to speak. Therefore, licensing has been accepted over the years. And I'm saying this for us to understand that restrictions or limitations are ordinarily allowed. Now, in coming to this conclusion, the Supreme Court mentioned something, and I'll probably end here for others to also have their bites. I'm sure we can come back again for the legal conversation moving forward. But the Supreme Court then qualified it with another provision of the Constitution, which is Article 164, which deals with reasonable restrictions that are allowed in a democracy. In my judgment, all that we're discussing will come to that conclusion, i.e. what is called the necessity test. Restrictions are allowed. The National Media Commission is a regulatory body. The Ministry of Communication is a sector ministry. These bodies are allowed to impose restrictions. They are allowed to impose relevant and necessary restrictions. The only qualifying criterion is the necessity of those restrictions. And in deciding necessity, a former judge of the Supreme Court, Justice Datiba, said, we have to look, among others, on the question of discretionary powers. We have to look, among others, on the rational basis of imposing the restriction. I.e., we ask ourselves, are there other alternative means of going about the same situation without doing as much damage as this particular measure would have done? Okay. If there are other such means, then we should prefer those. If there are no such means, then it means that the restriction that has been imposed, if necessary, is justified because there is no other alternative. So
I think it's a great foundation.
Yeah.
Give me some. Great foundation. I want to ask you just two quick questions to wrap up the legal part. Two things. We're saying that there is a draft policy which has not been, for want of a better word, ratified by the various stakeholders. And you are taking actions on the basis of a draft policy. That's number one problem. Number two, we're saying that in seeking to migrate all of us to a digital platform from analog, which you all agree and have been part of, you have changed the rules in the middle of the game. You were supposed to migrate everybody onto the digital platform, whether they wanted to be free to air or pay TV. 98.9% of people in Ghana have free to air. But you are introducing a conditional access into the migration process. And we're saying that what that does is that those who used to get TV free have to pay to get free TV. So we are saying two things. So that conditional access requirement, we are not saying don't migrate to digital, but we are saying that the conditional access requirement means that those who used to watch TV as a free-to-air thing have to pay. So you are forcing and you are restricting free watching of TV. So those are the two things we're saying. Among other things, we're also saying the person managing that platform may not be independent, but that's a tertiary issue. So I want you to address those 2 points. Whether you can start, for example, because they made an announcement in April that people who import devices based on the old system should stop importing those devices. So we are saying that we know you are acting based on a policy which you consider a draft policy, which Judge Anda confirmed. And number two, in seeking to do that, you are preventing 99% of the people from getting access to free-to-air TV.
The second question, and the facts you've alluded to and some of the things that have been said here, creates a confusion of facts. You know, I heard you say draft policy, and I've heard people say draft policy, but I've also heard directives. So I am not sure whether there is a draft policy or we have gone past the draft policy. I have to be honest about this. I do not have the fullness of facts. And usually when I speak and I do not have the fullness of facts, I always add conditions so nobody can question what I say. So if the policy is a draft policy, then actions cannot be taken on the draft policy because draft is draft, temporary, in the process of review, consultation, etc. So it's not completed. So if it is a draft policy, then I do not see how directives have been issued. And you are saying directives have been issued. And I think I heard that this morning as well, that directives have been issued. If truly directives have been issued on the draft policy, then in substance it is no more a draft policy, i.e. if indeed it is true that directives have been issued. Now, on the other question of whether you can actually put restrictions on people making payments, etc., as I indicated, discretionary powers, when conferred on a body, can be exercised by that body. In the case of restrictions on the media, the test is necessity, i.e., is the imposition necessary and justified, i.e., is there an alternative means by which this same policy could have been implemented without that restriction? If there is no alternative means, then it means it's necessary. The only problem, as one can see here, and just from the standpoint of my background as a constitutional law person, I was introduced earlier as someone with expertise on telecoms. Let me say that is not true. So while I thank that person for giving me a future aspiration on what I should specialize in, I'm not yet there. I'm not an expert in telecom matters. But in terms of, from the point of constitutional law alone, some impositions or levies sometimes come in the character of taxes. And the Constitution has a restriction on the imposition of taxes. So whatever levy is imposed on citizens that may have the character of taxation, there's a requirement that Parliament have to approve it. So again, I'm just unpacking these things for us to have clarity on the issues. If it is again the case that there's going to be an imposition of a levy that all of us have to pay, then my expectation is that there must be some parliamentary oversight. But as to the necessity, as to the justification, I will not want to make a direct pronouncement on it, except to say that some of these things only the court can decide. So I've given the principles. One of them is necessity, or the key one is necessity. Any restriction that is imposed on media rights, any restriction that is imposed on the right of information, it must be necessary. And in the case of necessity, means there are no alternatives. That is the best option, and no other option can be resorted to without implementing the policy.
I think it's brilliant. Thank you very much, Kofi Abochi. Let me come to Prince Crystal. You're the industry player, and so you're about engineering and business, right? So you're saying there was an announcement in the newspapers that the government or the Ministry of Communication was saying people who import certain gadgets should stop. And you are construing that to be laying the grounds to implement parts of the draft policy which has not been agreed on. Great. Who is going to be negatively affected by this? And why is it such a problem? Is it we, the TV viewers? Is it the people who import gadgets? Is it the TV stations? Explain the various people who will be touched if what government intends to do goes unhindered.
Thank you very much. I will touch on this, but I'll quickly go back to the first question you asked about what is the role of government in the whole digital migration process. Now, there are two basic roles. One of them has to do with spectrum dividend, which I would explain. And the other one has to do with the fact that you want to help the consumers or viewing populace of Ghana easily transition from analog to digital. So government has an interest in ensuring that its citizens continue to watch TV unhindered, whether in analog or in the transition to digital. Now, spectrum dividend simply means that if you take 1 to 10 as a scale of preference, and these would represent the frequencies you give to a TV channel, TV3 may be occupying channel 1 or frequency 1, but in the analog domain, that would be the only entity occupying that space. But in digital, it will give rise or give birth to many more channels using the same channel 1. So what happens is if Ghana should have 5 channels in all, then in digital, you could have 5 plus an extra 19 space available for new channels to come on board using the DVB-T2 technology. Now, that space that is left between channel 2 or frequency 2 all the way to frequency 10 on the scale of preference would be what the government would achieve in reserving space or conserving space. That is what we call spectrum or spectral dividend. So government needs this resource to be able to churn out new services. And as a result, when we migrated from analog to digital, we gave birth to new services such as 4G LTE, long-term evolution. And then we also are looking forward to bringing on board 5G service. So these are things that government has an interest in. Now, coming back to the impact and implications of implementing conditional access in a DTT setup. Now, as I have already alluded to, we have authorization specified for free-to-air broadcasters by the NCA. And we also have another category for pay TV. So the primary effect would land on the broadcasters' authorization they currently hold, because their authorization is meant to serve the people without encrypting the signal and leaving the channels in the clear, so that regardless of whichever decoder or whichever TV set you have, you should continue to watch TV unhindered. But when you do so by introducing a conditional access, then you are creating a monopoly, because the conditional access software is a proprietary license that is given to an entity, whether it is government or it is the operator or the BSD, broadcast signal distributing entity. What it means is that you are creating a monopoly, and everybody in Ghana is to go and get one type of decoder to be able to continue watching TV. So that's an impact. Now, if I dovetail into...
As we speak now, different people can buy different decoders to access the content.
Yes.
But if the directive we saw in the newspapers is to be followed, all those devices can no longer receive free-to-air.
They can no longer receive free-to-air, unless you go and add the new prescribed box to what you currently have. That would be the only way you can continue.
And you're
watching.
saying that would disadvantage the TV operators, the content providers who are already sending their content to the existing channels?
Yes, the reason is because our model or free-to-air broadcast model is dependent on the number of viewers to drive your advertising revenue.
Not pay subscription.
Pay subscription is collecting money from each and every individual for the content they access, so that the subscriber-based entity can survive.
So number one, it will affect you and me.
Correct.
Who else is going to be affected?
The viewers.
In what way?
Fundamental human rights. Article 21, A, 1A, says that every individual in Ghana or every individual has a right to access to information and freedom of the media. So when you do so, someone living in Kasina Nankana or Laura district, who is a charcoal seller, who needs to know how he's going to tamprint the next ballot. When you put in conditional access and he comes home and is unable to subscribe or pay for the TV license or the digital access fee, you are curtailing access to information.
Don't forget, he's told you that there's no right which is unfettered. And he's also said that we will determine whether that restriction is necessary or not. So keep that in mind.
So in answer to that, we have preferred alternatives, about 3 or 4 alternatives to implementing a conditional access. And that is why I said up till now, the Ministry of Information and the Ministry of Communications are not discussing those options.
What are those options?
1, it is obvious that the TV stations who are requiring the services of the DTT platform, let the viewers understand that in analog, every TV station transmits their own programs from whichever location. That is why when you tune your antenna in one direction, you can't receive the other one very clearly. But in digital, every TV stations have been put into one house so that wherever you are, you can send your antenna and point to it and you will receive very clean and clear signal. So by so doing, these TV stations that you have put together, I'm missing the point, but it has to do, bring me back.
You're saying that when you decide to do digital, it means that it's easier for receivers to get all the stations irrespective of where they are located.
That's right.
Now you're saying that the conditional access makes it difficult or blocks that free access by having them to pay.
That's right.
Which is the second impediment you're putting in there.
That's right.
I think that's fair enough. We'll pause it here.
Now the dealers.
Okay, yes.
You have authorized 500 models who go through a rigorous process of certifying their products or decoders or TV sets in accordance with the GS 1099 standard.
Standards Authority.
Standards Authority. Now, without consultation, you publish this directive telling them to hold off any further manufacturing of set-top boxes that have already been certified by the NCA. So there is an issue there. It concerns them. There are
How large is the industry of these people? How many people are involved?
Precisely, there are over 50 individual companies, but each company produces different models. It's like you pick Infinix. So you have Infinix 1, Infinix 2, Infinix 3, different models. If you pick LG, you have LG 1, LG 2, different models.
What's the financial size of that industry?
It's huge. You can talk about, we have 4.6 million viewers or 4.6 million households in Ghana who are consuming this product. So you can tell the number of millions of TV sets and decoders that have been distributed onto the market. And
all
this
these
is
distributors
huge.
have to go and adhere to the new standard,
Yes.
irrespective of orders they've placed and what they've been.
Correct.
All of that.
And going for the new standard, there is nowhere in the world that you set a maximum specification. You set a minimum. So adding a conditional access, which is a proprietary product belonging to one entity as a licensed software provider, is a problem.
Just finally, I hope this is making sense. What problem do you have with the governance of the process? Because I've heard you say the president will appoint somebody, and that person may not be independent, and the Media Commission's role has been taken away. What are you really talking about?
The Media Commission's role is to insulate the media from governmental control. That's one of their mandate. Now, when you have a 7-member board, and I itemize the membership, 6 out of those membership are going to be coming directly paying their allegiance to the appointing authority, which is the president. So GIBA would be the only one out of that because we are sending a nominee to the 7-member board.
Who are the other 6?
So you have the Ministry of Communication, so definitely it's coming from government. You have Ministry of Finance coming from government. The chairperson will be appointed by the president. The CEO will be appointed by the president, and someone representing the public would also be appointed by the president. Now, the danger in there is that you are giving full control to the government, whereas in 1994, we fought for the liberalization of the airwaves. And 25 years on, we have served Ghana as the fourth estate of the realm.
Practically, how would this affect the performance of that board? So, for example, there's an election going on, and there's a TV station that's notoriously anti-government. Are you proposing that because 6 out of the 7 people owe allegiance to the government, some things can be done by the body that manages the platform?
Absolutely.
To get that channel off?
Absolutely.
Is that the kind of thing you're seeing?
I'll give you an example that happened in 2018 in Kenya. President Uhuru Kenyatta was sworn in as the president of Kenya. And then we saw Raila Odinga also mounting a stage to stage his own swearing-in ceremony. This is, to journalists, newsworthy. But there was a directive given that no TV station or radio station or the print media should carry Raila Odinga's swearing-in ceremony. So what happened is when the TV networks and radio networks carried it, immediately a call was placed to the DTT platform or the managers of the platform, and these channels were shut down.
Who manages the platform in that country?
I do not know the name, but it is also within the remit of government.
It's a similar arrangement to what this is being proposed here.
It's a similar arrangement.
Very interesting. I think you've said enough. Has it made sense? Can we move on? Good. So now I want to bring in the media governance angle. Okay, so Nana, you've chaired the media commission. You've done media for many, many years. What's going on here from where you sit? What's going on?
I don't know.
You don't know what's going on?
Well, actually, I thank you for the opportunity, and I agreed to participate in this in a way to widen the discussion. I know that we are focusing on the issues before us now, but they go further. And if we do not seize this opportunity to make that comment, we may be missing something. Last year, the Media Commission organized a press conference at which we sounded the alarm, and that was about the DTT company, the digital company that is supposed to be set up by the Ministry of Communication and whose composition has already been mentioned. We explained that this violated the Constitution in a significant way. The Media Commission considered in its communication that this entity would be part of the state-owned media. Why? Because by definition it's owned by the state and it would be performing a media function if the platform's duty is to enable media communication to take place. Therefore, as the Constitution gives that power solely to the Media Commission to appoint the chair and members of state-owned media entities, this must not be in the remit of the Ministry of Communication. And we said that not responding at that time to this illegality would be going down the slippery slope and more would happen. Now it is happening. So clearly, the issue of media governance, the bigger picture, must come into play. What appears to be the case here is that we have an unfinished business. For many decades, the struggle for democracy has had media independence and freedom as an integral part. There can be no democracy without a free and independent media. And therefore, in fighting for the Constitution that we had in '92, necessarily we had to fight for freedom and independence of the media. And this has been guaranteed in the Constitution. And a significant part, indeed not a significant part, the entire logic of Chapter 12 of the Constitution is to get government off the backs of the media. And therefore, to have any ministry using the digitization process as a means to come in, as indeed the Ministry of Communication appears to be doing, violates both the letter and spirit of the Constitution.
Quick question for you. We know from the media that we in electronic media, we say that we have two quote-unquote regulators.
No, there's only one regulator.
No, let me ask my question. Then you answer it. Relax. Just relax for me. I am saying that we typically say we have two regulators. From the technical side, the NCA, and from the content side, the NMC. Now, explain to us how the NMC is set up which makes it a more worthy representative of independence than the NCA? You get my point? Yes. Explain how the NMC is, which makes it a more, how shall I say? Yeah, that's the word.
Yeah, the NMC, as you know, is a constitutional body, and its independence is guaranteed by the means by which it is composed. So you have journalists, lawyers, teachers, all these associations representing. There are 18 members, and they come from a variety of sources. The government, the presidency has 2 reps, and parliament has 3, of whom 1 should come from the minority. And then by some means, the representative of the Ministry of Women and Children, or whatever the ministry looking after that, of the women, is represented. But in the Constitution, it originally was for the National Commission on Women and Development, and that has changed slightly. But that's about the membership that you can call
so there are
government.
Religious bodies, there's independent media, there's
independent
GIBA,
media, they're all there.
All on the 18.
All on the 18.
So how do you arrive at decisions? If that, is it the chairman, or is it consensus, or how do you arrive at decisions?
Well, as you may, with any such body, you can arise at any decision by consensus, by voting, by whatever. But usually it's by consensus. And because the issues that are contested are defined by the Constitution, i.e. the independence and freedom of the media. So there's not a whole range of disagreement. Because actually the job of the NMC is to guarantee, is the guarantor of Chapter 12 of the Constitution. Now, as our lawyer explained, you may make laws, and the NMC did make an LI, which famously was opposed by GIBA, and which, out of good manners, I didn't want to mention, but inevitably we have to comment on, because it would have taken care of some of these issues. My final word would be, which I would come to in a minute, but the point you asked, let us say that, let's explain that the NCA is a government body, completely. And so there is no competition. The NCA is not an independent body. The NCA is not a regulator of the media. There's only one media regulator by our Constitution, and that's the National Media Commission, which has been established and given the task of ensuring that we have good content.
Yeah, but I need to clarify that the person who gives the spectrum for digital players in the electronic media is the NCA. So even though they are not the regulator stricto sensu, we pay license fees of some kind. We are answerable to them in certain technical. So for example, if your frequency is supposed to be FM, you can't go beyond 100-kilometer radius, and the NCA, not the NMC, would bring you to book. So I'm trying to let people who are not in Ghana understand that the way the system is set up, we need to explain that even though you are our regulator, we also have somebody we are answerable to in technical specifications of our broadcasting, which is the NCA. Even
that is not true. You see, and I no longer speak for the NMC, but of course I know a fair bit. And much of what the NCA must do regarding the media, they must do in consultation or together with the NMC, which has not been taking place. And I think for this, it is partly the fault of the NMC for not ensuring that this is done. Even in the issues of closing down radio stations and all the rest of them, this must be done with the NMC, because the NMC guarantees the independence and freedom, and that means the quality and quantity of content.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you very much. So far, we're making sense. This is a live event we're organizing at Alisa, trying to understand the data migration process and the future of free-to-air television in Ghana. And it's a broadcast media industry forum, and we have a panel that's trying to break down the issues. So far, we've heard from the legal side, we've heard from the engineering quasi-economic side, we've also heard from the NMC side. Now, Greg, just remain patient for me. I'll come to you. Suleiman, you are the one who looks at press freedom globally. You are the one who shouts when people are being oppressed. Is this part of the things that the Media for West Africa is concerned about in relation to media freedom, or this is a technical issue?
Well, thank you very much, Bernard. I would want to start my submission with a recent development. So I have a friend who is in the military who traveled to Congo for peacekeeping. So the wife delivered, the mother came from Sandema to help take care of the baby. And the mother comes and says, well, I have this interesting program on television in the evening that I would want to always watch. So 3 consecutive days, he was able to watch this program. Then 4th, 5th, 6th days, the TV is off. And the woman asks, the daughter-in-law, what's happening? And this lady says, well, we are on the Go TV thing. It's my husband who usually would pay. I don't even know there's something called IC number. I have to pay this, I have to pay that. So the woman says, but I watched this program on UTV. Does it mean that UTV people have stopped working? Because I can't get them. And it had to be explained that, no, they are working, but it's just that the system we are using, we can't get it. And it's like, well, then maybe I would have to, I want to go back to Sandema to be able to get my distance. So this lady calls the husband, and the husband says, well, I cannot pay from here, so just disconnect from the Go TV and plug it to the normal antenna. And then that is done. The woman says, okay, now this is TV, Just to illustrate the point that this is what is going to happen. That UTV will be working, CTV will be working, content is being produced, because I heard that the deputy minister talked about, the business is content, but the question is, if you produce content and it cannot be delivered, just as CTV or UTV might have been or would have been working, but this woman couldn't access it. So that content that is being produced, for who? If you are producing and people cannot access it. So that is number one. Number two is also to explain the fact that, look, people, as at this stage, don't even know what is happening. The awareness creation is not there. And I like the point that the deputy minister made, that we shouldn't take 1 step forward and 5 steps back. But that is exactly what we are doing in our context here in Ghana. Look, on 21st of May, the president just assented to the Right to Information Law, which is supposed to actually make access to information much more freer beyond, or, to guarantee further what is provided in the Constitution. But we are at this stage talking about conditional access to television for everyone, because now those set-top boxes that are in the system that even allow people, to access free-to-air content, we are being told, look, distribution must cease, no more importation, and we're going to introduce something that would allow for everyone, before you access television, you pay, or otherwise we block you, because it is conditional. I think the good thing is that Ghana is not the first to be going through this digital migration process. And we are talking about a national resource, which is a natural resource. We can agree we've abused our gold, maybe our oil not too well managed, and so on and so forth. But we've had the opportunity now to ensure that there is proper management of this spectrum, which is a national resource. And because it's a national resource, that is why around the world, there is that caution to every government that in the process of migration, one thing must be clear. Governments must endeavor that in the process, people who are already accessing television would not be deprived. And conditions must not be set to make it difficult for people to continue to access television just because we are migrating. Because the migration process is supposed to present advantages to a country and not disadvantages. And in this case, what we are doing, if we are not careful, that is what would happen. I made the point that Ghana is not the first country. We have the benefit of learning from other countries. In the ASEAN regions, countries, Indonesia, Malaysia, Australia, and so on and so forth. Even in Africa, in Kenya, Kenya has made a very, taken advanced step in terms of the migration process. And in all these, if you read, they will all point to 3 key recommendations in the migration process. 1, a country must have a very clear strategic document that will guide the process. I believe here in Ghana, it started in 2010, and people were on board and so on and so forth. Number 2, that such a document must be developed in a participatory way. Stakeholders must be involved, and at the end of the day, these stakeholders must validate and accept it as something that would, be efficient for the country. And number 3, the people for whom this is being done, the citizenry, must understand and must know about it. As we speak now, I don't know which of these three conditions as a country we've met. And you asked about whether we are concerned, or this is something that relates to press freedom, independence of the media, freedom of expression. And indeed, perhaps it is the most fundamental thing, because we're talking about a situation when, if allowed, as we are being told now, thousands of people are going to be deprived of access to television. This morning when I was coming in, I saw your billboard, City TV billboard around Hachu. Yes. And you said, you can access, are you watching? You can access us using your digital TV. Just that, not a set-top box. Once I have a digital TV, I should be able to access City TV. But we are being told that no, this time around, it's not just your digital TV. You know, beyond your digital TV, if you have a DSTV decoder or GoTV decoder or whatever it is, no, it won't work. You know, you now have to get another one. And there is a group that has the capacity to ensure that even though City TV is producing, whether you can watch or not depends on whether you pay or you don't pay. I may be able to afford to pay, but what about, you know, my mother, my father, my grandparents in the village and so on and so forth, who have been used to watching TV, you switch it on, and unless there is doomsaw, you know, you have your television on. So it's a big freedom of expression issue. It's a big independence of the media issue, because who is regulating what? Who ensures that I'm able to access, or who makes it possible for me to be able to access? And that is why the point about the board is so critical. The difference between the NMC, NCA, the Director General of the NCA is an appointee of the President. The Deputy Director General, the board, who chairs the board, all that. But if you take the National Media Commission, you know, this is an independent entity. NAT is there. School of Communication, GIJ, and so on, they have a representative. Ghana Bar Association, somebody is there. GJA, 2 representatives are there. GIBA, they are there. Muslims Association, they are there. Christian groups, they are there, and so on and so forth. And one cannot say that such an institution can be manipulated. But we have, you know, the NCA, which is completely a government creation. In fact, if elections next year, it happens that the NDC wins, for example, the people who are leading the NCA would automatically be changed, just as they were changed when, you know, the NDC lost power. And if you have a situation where entities are going to be created, stakeholders, key stakeholders such as GIBA, not fully consulted for them to be on board, and we say, let this go, I don't think that we'll be creating something that is worthwhile.
Thank you very much. So far, one of the things that have come out is, in attempting to migrate from analog to digital, we're also transitioning from free to pay. You know, so we are using the analog to digital as a pretext for converting free to a couple of points for Greg. So do you understand what we're saying here? Or is this all like something, I mean, and how did it happen in the UK? Did you also have all these kinds of interest fighting before you came to some resolution?
Yes, I do understand what you're saying, and it's very interesting. I'd say
sound.
Yeah, it's all working? Yep. Yeah. So it is actually sort of using switchover as a way of implementing a different policy, and I think that's come out in a number of areas. I think in the UK, I mean, in one sense, I think what was just being said was very interesting, because it's exactly how we tried to do it. What we had was the government set an objective. We need to switch over because we want to clear spectrum, but also we want to increase the choice for viewers, and also we want to lower the cost of entry for broadcasters. So there was 3 benefits, and the government did quite a complicated cost-benefit analysis to justify the investment required from everybody to do that. So the government set the policy, then the regulator set the objectives for the licensees and how to deliver it. So they set very broad objectives. You know, you must do it by this date. You must do it such that people are informed about the options, informed how to convert. The government also put in place a scheme to subsidize, a bit like vouchers you have here, to enable people who couldn't afford to access the services to be given it for free. So there was a sort of a high-level policy and implementation approach. But then what happened was that government regulators told the broadcasters to do the plan. You know, it's up to you to think about how you want to deliver that, because it's your service. Wow. You understand the network.
They told the broadcasters to bring the plan based on the objectives and the strategy.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then also the broadcasters were told to manage the communication to viewers, because it's their viewers. They understand.
So they should manage the communication to their respective viewers.
Yes.
So they all understand what's going to happen.
Yes. Yeah. So we had a delegation, and therefore the broadcasters were required to produce the plan, deliver the plan, but also the government put in place a stakeholder framework to provide everybody who was going to be connected to that to be part of the discussions. Now, they weren't making decisions, but they were certainly a very key stakeholder engagement. So viewer groups, for instance, was very important. Disabled groups were very important. Manufacturing industry was part of it. The transmission industry was part of it. So we had a very key stakeholder group which had a lot of power. It reported to ministers. So if they felt they weren't getting the broadcasters to do sensible things, ministers had, and I was in this group, every quarter we had 2 ministers sitting down with the stakeholder chair, with the broadcaster group chair, with the regulator, which I was at, talking about what's going on. So if people were thinking the process wasn't working, it was taken up to ministers quickly. Ministers weren't concerned about the detail. They just wanted to make sure it was done. And because they're political, they have sensitivity about adverse publicity. So they wanted to make sure that people weren't complaining either. So we had a very, in one sense, it was quite inclusive, but it was, I think, because the broadcasters had to deliver it, the broadcasters got the benefits, they were required to actually get it done quickly.
But your system, your broadcasting platform industry is, the industry setup is a bit different. The BBC is very powerful, and here we have a lot of different broadcasters. But of course, we have the independent broadcasters, and then we have the state broadcaster. I'm not sure if it's a comparable broadcasting landscape.
Yeah. The BBC are powerful, but they weren't the only, because the commercial public broadcasters, people I work for now, ITV, Channel 4, are very powerful. They have comparable budgets. Politically, the BBC have a sort of different role. Okay. But I think the broadcasters were very broad-based. Okay. And it wasn't the BBC dominating, it was consensus. Everyone had to do it. And in the UK, the platform is split. We've got about 1/3 platform carries public service content, but 2/3 carries effectively the GIBA type content, straight commercial players who produce content with advertising and haven't got any public service requirements. So it's not dissimilar, I think, from what you might see here as well.
All right. So I think what is clear is that we don't have a government rep here because there are very pertinent questions they have to answer. For example, why are they seeking to introduce the conditional access as part of the platform for migration? Maybe they could explain that in greater detail. So we don't know. But I'm going to give Kofi a quick round of comments. Then we're taking some questions because I think now we understand the issue. The viewers, we hope you get the issues. And if not, you can let us know. You wanted to make a comment when we were discussing the role of NMC versus NCA, feeling that the NMC was a more legitimate, independent rep of the people than NCA and that kind of thing. Any comment there?
Right. But before I say that, I'm not sure this works. Okay, it's supposed to work, so it works. I think in the case of the question, before I take that, the question you posed to Greg, maybe it would be useful to also contextualize things, because the UK is a little bit different from Ghana in some ways, and this may not be too palatable for GIBA, but the truth of the matter is a lot of the free-to-air stations in the UK may have some minimum degree of public broadcasting content. In other words, broadcasting that is governance-related, that is public interest-related. And so there's a reason why probably the emphasis on the payment of money may also not have been a factor in the UK situation, not to mention the fact that the development level of the UK is different from Ghana. Now, the point is this. I do not think that the payment of a fee of its own is problematic or maybe problematic. What is problematic about it is the demographic character of the consumers of the media content in Ghana. I think that was read out. If you have 98.something% on free-to-air, and of that percentage, you have a certain significant percentage of the population who are indigent, who are poor, and who can't afford, then that represents almost a logical way of depriving these people of access to information. And so if you sign a Freedom of Information Act, if the Constitution says there's a right of information, if you put all these together, and at the same time we have factors that invariably act as a blockade to accessing this information, then that's where one can speak of policy discordance. You know, you have policies that are not in sync with each other. So I do see the differences in the UK scenario, but I think it's important for us to also put things in context. I have said before that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. You know, sometimes there are a lot of good intentions, but the way we go about them may create problems. I do think that the ministry probably may be well motivated. This is a country whose major flagship policy under the government is to help Ghana go past aid. And so you can see a situation in which there's an attempt at domestic maximizing domestic revenue in many ways, in every way possible. And so using the spectrum of media could just be another opportunity of seeing how best we can mobilize revenue in Ghana as much as possible. So the intention itself may be noble. The intention itself need not be bastardized of its own. I do not think that this gathering should be about that. I think this gathering is about finding the best possible ways of not depriving people of information and invariably also depriving people of employment, because the GIBA employs a large chunk of Ghanaians, and if their businesses go down because the advertisement revenues go down, because consumers go down, there's a ripple effect, and ultimately that will affect that. And then quickly, just about the, forgive me for that, but just quickly chipping in on the question of the National Media Commission. Again, I think it's important for us to look at the issues carefully, and many of the issues, to be honest with you, we can't complete them here. Consultations are useful, and I'm sure consultations are ongoing. So good faith on the part of both parties are important. We have not looked a lot at media management companies or entities in Ghana as distinguished from media houses. And so the GBC is a media house. The GBC is covered under state-owned media. But an entity that is established that may not transmit content, may not produce content, but only manages the collection of, say, revenue, that entity may not necessarily be a media house. But as to whether that entity is only going to be about the collection of revenue and not doing anything about management of content or, the administration of content is another story. But the example that he gave is also notable, the Kenyan example, because it's an example of our time, where we have a clear situation in which government was actually able to shut media that was not palatable or that was not in line with their policies, shut them down in the Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta scenario. So all these are important things that have to be considered, but from a strict technical point of view, the media house, a media house can be distinguished from a media management house. They are two different things, except that in Ghana, we hardly have a pure media management house. I suspect that's why that hasn't come up. And so if this is going to be purely about the management of media-related thing, as opposed to the production and transmission of content or the mainstream media activity, it's important to probably have an eye on that.
So I think I need to come to the audience if you have any questions. So, or any general comments, we'll be very happy to take them. Yeah, okay, yeah, quick one there.
But we'll talk about that later. I just think on this one, I have been in the media for many years. I think this media management company and media company kind of thing is one that we should not bring in to cloudy or muddy the waters. The thing is this: the Media Commission, when I was on it, after analyzing the situation, concluded that this digital company being set up, to the extent that its main operation, at that time it was not about collecting revenue, is to enable this is to enable other television stations to reach their audiences. And if that is its main job, then it should be classified as media. To be fair, the ministry says it should only be classified as infrastructure. We differ with them on that, because infrastructure has to have a purpose, and its purpose is to deliver media. And if that is true, then the Constitution says that that role should be played by the National Media Commission. It is not all about, it's not being unreasonable or trying to oppose the ministry for opposing sake. In order that we go forward as a nation, we devised a constitution for ourselves, and the constitution clearly set out certain areas based on our history. And it is clear at this point that if we know why the NMC route was selected by the Constituent Assembly and approved in the Constitution, we would see why this is very important. That is not just a matter of revenue collection, and if we want to go beyond aid, and then therefore it's a matter of how do we collect money. That's not the point.
No, my intention is not to make it. No, the
if
media,
we are not careful.
GIBA hasn't paid me anything. Nor has the ministry paid me anything.
No, I'm
no,
just...
I know. So therefore, I'm sorry, I apologize. So therefore, normally what I do is that I don't give definitive statements. What I do is to give the two ifs. So what I gave were the two ifs. I haven't actually concluded either way. I said if it's a pure management-related activity, again, and it has to be spelled out, then it's a management company. But if its work will straddle the transmission or any activity which is mainstream media, then it's media. So respectfully, the point is just leave it open. I do not know the details because none of you have actually paid me.
Yeah, lawyer, I came in because you were a conditioner, but I know. You know, you gave an if, and I'm saying that on that alone, I know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Brilliant stuff. There's a question coming in from a viewer. Question to Harry. Who is covering the cost of DTT, and what is wrong with the agency that is investing in the infrastructure dictating the terms? This is a double-barrel question to you. It says, ask Harry, who is covering the cost of the DTT, and what is wrong with the agency that is investing in the infrastructure dictating the terms? You want to take some notes there, or you want to answer directly? Go straight ahead. Okay.
All right. In the first instance, the setup of the DTT infrastructure was led by government and funded by government, but this resource was harvested from the release of spectrum. So if you will remember, in the some few years ago, we had an auction, and MTN won for the 4G service. So the money derived from that was what funded the DTT platform. Now, the second mode of sustenance for the platform is for the TV networks who are going to be carried on the platform to pay transmission costs or transmission tariffs to the platform for its survival. Then you also want to look at a third option, which is now being introduced or reintroduced, which is the TV license stuff. So if that should work, there should be other alternatives apart from implementing the conditional access, which eventually would run the business of free-to-air television broadcasts in the country.
Thank you very much. This panel has done a great job. Please put your hands together for them. I want to take any questions or comments, if there are any. So you just, for the sake of our viewers, identify yourself. Please hand him a mic so we know who you are. And then you go straight. If it's a question, you direct it to the person you want. If it's a comment, we are happy to take it. I want to recognize the former minister for the purpose of this program, for communication, Dr. Ekospio Gabra. Although he's recently former minister for trade, he was he's been instrumental in this ministry that's overseeing this. So if there's time, he'll make a few comments if he has any. Thank you, Doc. So please go ahead.
Thank you very much.
As you start speaking, to come. Speak by faith.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy about this session on broadcasting journey. The fact that now we are talking about content being the name of the game. In all the discussion, what I've noticed that creators of content are not recognized. I haven't seen an input from creators of content. Now that we are moving to content, what parts or what provision have been made for creators? Now, Article 13 of the EU directive, content providers have a right, are now obliged to put down content that has not been cleared. So if my work is put on a particular platform, that platform has not paid the necessary rights or copyright, then the content can be, the platform can be flagged to put out that content. If this DDT migration has that capacity and that aspect also, because as much as we are providing content to people, the creators need to be more or less compensated for them to continue providing that aspect of the content.
All right.
They are not part of the discussion.
Thank you very much for your point. We'll address it. Are there any more questions?
Just raise your hand.
Yes, there's one here. Mr. Befi Apinting, an industry person.
Thank you. I must disclose that as far back as about 2011, I had presented something like this to government as Director General of GBC, asking for us to use the digital migration opportunity to collect money collect the TV license.
You are the one.
And Chief Crystal is here. We had a lot of lively discussions on the National Digital Migration Committee on this. I mean, he opposed to my position. The NCA opposed to it, but we argued. I'm surprised that the NCA has now more or less taken up this position. But I think that even as we discuss this now, we must look at the business case or the economics of it. The migration thing has been seen as being driven by government. And even though we would say that government has reaped the digital dividend and invested it in this, it's still government money. So if we always look up to government to use public funds to do this, and operationally we haven't sorted out properly how this entity would run, then government is going to find ways to make money. Conditional access is being brought up only as a way of generating revenue. One, to support public broadcasting. Two, to operationalize, to operate the entity. We may, when we do the economics seriously, end up finding out that if we want to pay economic rates for being on the transmission system, many of the current broadcasters may drop out. So there's need for us to look at the economics critically and then begin to make the arguments not only based on the freedom of expression and freedom of the independence of the media, but also look at the business case for this. And probably if we expanded the discussion on the other areas, it may be more helpful for
Thank you very much, Mr. Befi Aprintin. We appreciate it. So the economics dimension is always important. I've scanned the room. Dr. Ekosio-Gabra, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you very much. I would have preferred not to say anything, but once you had identified me, then I guess it's difficult to stay out of the discussion. And actually, before my good friend and brother, Mr. Penting, spoke, I didn't know whether he had been introduced yet. So I was going to introduce him, just as you introduced me. Because I think, among many other things, he's probably one of the few people in this country that has had the privilege of being both a Director General of Ghana Broadcasting as well as was the Managing Director of the Graphic Corporations, a double accomplishment in the media. And of course, I want to pay homage to my friends, many of them here, including Mr. Crystal and my Soledad brother, who is wearing a cap in the back there. He will explain that to you later. But my main point here is simply to say that Ghana, and I think it's been said by one of the panelists, is a member of at least two very important international organizations that are very interested in this matter. There are several others, but the two that are critically important that Ghana is a member of are the International Telecom Union and the Commonwealth Telecom Organization, where I also had the privilege to serve. And I believe that when countries such as Ghana are going through the challenges that we are facing, it doesn't hurt, if this hasn't been done already, for us to seek some support and intervention from these global bodies who, as some of the panelists have been suggesting, can draw our attention to the best practices all the way from the case of the Commonwealth, from the Samoa and Toga and Australia, all the way to Canada, and the ITU, all the 190 or so countries that are members, so that we have a comparative understanding of how others have solved this problem in a manner that, yes, we want to have a Ghanaian solution to a Ghanaian problem, but unfortunately for us, the world of media, the world of telecom and the infrastructure that supports it is a global system. So the fiber optics and the satellite, communications that transmit most of the communications these days, the internet, are not necessarily or are barely owned by Ghanaians or Ghana. We are ourselves beneficiaries of these global international information technology infrastructure, which drives the content. And so that would be my main recommendation here, that whoever is doing this, both GIBA and the government of Ghana, may seek the intervention of these two international bodies just to help us move faster. As CEO of the CTO, we started having digital broadcasting conferences in Johannesburg as early as 2005. And Ghanaians were almost every year being invited to these particular conferences and workshops alongside it, training programs. So there's a lot of knowledge in the country about it. I don't doubt it. But where you need a referee to help you out with a problem, the international community exists to do just that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. We'll take another comment, actually two more from the back. And if there's anything you hear that you want to comment on, we'll be happy to. So there's a content question, there's economics question, there's the international best practice question as well. Thank you. So please go ahead with your comment.
Thank you very much. Well, one man's former boss, Mr. Appington, has spoken. I've been compared. Our history will not absorb me for the role some of us have played in this issue. One, the GBC has about 6 channels. And when this Dr. Adam Imoro, former GBC, I'm now retired from GBC, when he raised this issue of the conditional access, he had in mind 6 of the GBC channels. And he has some background about how this has been implemented. And when GBC started digital transmission in 2018, they have a limited number of programs. Then later, by 2010, they had about 6 programs running on the DTT platform. They ran a para system with, later came KNET, what KNET had implemented, 2 channels. Our concept was that there should be a nationwide channel, that's channel 28 currently, carrying all the current free-to-air channels with where the GBC channels are. And part of the implementation has been said that sometimes you can restrict the viewing of some of the programs and you make some of them open. And I recall in the current policy document, they have indicated that local content will be carried between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m., and then 6 p.m. or 6:30 p.m. and 9:30 p.m. During those periods, you could have almost all the channels open. Or for GBC, for instance, if they had sports, GBC Sports Plus, they could decide to restrict the viewing there based on those who pay the TV license. But generally, we didn't envisage all the free-to-air channels to be affected by this CA system. Now, one of the issues we also addressed to government or recommended to them was to separate the TV value chain. That's we have content, multiplexing, and transmission. Some jurisdictions have actually combined the second 2. That's a multiplexing where actually the CA or conditional affairs is performed. And then there's a transmission. Transmission is more or less content agnostic. It means that you just wait and push whatever is brought. Is that the multiplexing level that this restriction is brought? You either give, okay, maybe I've been told.
Can you come down some more? This is where you are taking me. Oh, check my crack.
Well, it's difficult to come down on some of these technical issues. But basically, one of the recommendations was to separate, in the analog domain. When you do analog, you have to have a spectrum. You have to have a channel, necessarily.
So what do you want to say?
What I want to say is that, one, GIBA and all the stakeholders must insist on the strict implementation of the recommendations of the committee, and now even some of the provisions on the policy. Because
the original policy.
775.
So hold on. They must insist on the strict implementation of the original policy.
Yes, that's...
Yeah, I want us to leave it here. That's enough for me.
Yeah, and then that will involve...
It's okay.
Okay.
Thank you. I believe you. Thank you. I've understood you. Just for the sake of time, I appreciate it. And since you have so much information on this, if we are having other engagements on other TV stations, we'll invite you. So thank you very much. We'll take a couple more comments. Yes, sir?
One more, then you go to...
Yes. Yes, sir. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Am I on?
Yes, you are on.
Good. I'm 14 years old on retirement. I don't have a job, but I'm a consultant. I offer free services in media, communications, and events. It's not an advertisement, it's free service. I have several questions, but I'll ask only 3. When we say public broadcasting, what do we mean? Elsewhere in the world, whether you are private sector or public sector, you render some public service broadcasting. Are GIBA members engaged in public service broadcasting? The next issue is this. We're talking about cost, levy, tax, to raise revenue, to fund public service broadcasting. There is a current TV license operation going on. It is raising revenue. Has anybody given us the cost of public service broadcasting in this country? What is the cost? What's the value? What is the shortfall between the agreed figure and the current TV license that we want to fill with this new system? There's an if, and I want to follow the example of the senior legal practitioner. The if is this. If this system comes into operation, what is the platform for the fixing of these new decoders in the rural communities? In my village, for example, how will it be fixed on the new TV set? I think that people must explain that. Accra will be easy, Kumasi will be easy, regional centers will be very easy, but what about the rural communities? Because currently you buy a TV, take it to the village, there's an internal antenna you plug in and it starts working. I'll remain there. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
That's a 3-in-1. So the comments are many. What we're trying to do is to get people to understand that not all the questions will be answered here. So I'm not expecting you to address every question. If you just hear something that you feel you want to touch on. So let me just summarize. So far, we've heard a question about independent content producers. Someone's talking about the economics of the industry, which this panel hasn't really been asked to address. Then the issue of what interventions the CTO or ITO or other bodies can make. Then there's the issue of going back to recommendations of the original policy. And then Big Godi has 3 points: who's public broadcasting, the current TV licensing regime, and then access to rural people. So there's a lot of things going on here. We'll take how many more? 1, 2. We have 2 more, and then we will wrap up. We want to close at 1, and the time is 12:52, so that we'll go off nicely and do our adverts. So we'll take 2 more quick points, you, and then Chief Crystal. Then that's the end of the comments. You have a minute.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I think my question.
Speak up, please.
I think part of my question has already been asked.
Then it's okay.
No, it's just a part of it. So there's little part left is what I'm just going to. And I think what I'm just trying to say is that we are happy. We've already heard from Mr. Apintin that it was originated during 2011. I think that one has already been pointed out. But I think another significant factor I have observed, I don't know whether many other people are also observing it. This free for all. Initially, I was having a problem with it because even as at this material moment, every form of this thing you are going to service you are going to get, you pay for it. Even the one we call free for all.
Free to air.
Free to air.
Free to air.
Okay. Because I think consumers still bear some cost. Because even if you want to watch ordinary TV without even not multi-TV or DSTV, you have to buy a pool. Yes, that is a cost. We shouldn't laugh at that cost. That is a cost. It's an original cost. Even multi-TV too, you need to buy the decoder. That is also a cost to a consumer. I'm talking about consumer. And not even talking about, I'm coming not to even talk about DSTV. So, and even if you watch, already we are paying for all services. So there's no even free to consume or free to air, even as at this moment. So my main point is that, to me, government charging TV license attached to the DTT, I mean, I think to me is not a cause for alarm. It's just a form of motivation. Because already the TV license is legal. It's something that we're supposed to be paying. It's bound by every citizen who owns TV to pay. So if now government is just attaching it to a, what do you call it? Is it DTT? It's just a form of motivation.
Okay.
So that is not
so
a
that's how
cause
you
for
see
alarm.
it. Thank you very much. Final comment, sir. Please go ahead quickly.
There you go.
Good afternoon. Now, my question is, I'm still struggling to understand the reason why the TV license was set up and why it continues. Why I'm saying that is, in the past, we had a system. We're operating analog, and it was meant for GBC because they were giving us lots of national items free of charge. I don't know what the law says about that. But now we are moving into a new space, digital space, and the government is still going to make more money from the extra, the spectrum. I mean, once we get to the digital, there's a whole lot of space which they could sell to the telcos. That's what is making the telcos expand. And there are some who still want that space. As at now, those of us who are in business, we don't even know how much we are going to pay for the setup. I mean, for the transmissions, because it's not free. Apart from that, we have whoever is going to, how you're going to relay your transmissions to the head end, you're going to pay for that. Apart from that, you're going to pay regulatory license fees to NCA every year. So if there's a condition for TV license, I'm struggling to understand what's the purpose and why do we need it. If it's just revenue, then I think now with a new system, the government has huge opportunities of making money.
Hence, the reason Berifia Apintin says we should do the economics so we can argue over numbers. Then we'll be clear and all not just be asking questions. So I think it's a very important point. And probably, by way of going forward, there needs to be a conversation on various scenarios, revenue and all of that. So thank you for that intervention. You have the last word, and you have a minute, even though you are the chief. You have a minute. We have to go off at 1.
Thank you very much. I'll take it from what Honorable Spio Gabra said. This whole idea of DTT, digital migration, and the problems in between pay TV and free-to-air certainly should be a matter of discussions, these passionate discussions leading to how to solve financial problems. It shouldn't be a case where we think that there are no alternatives. There are tested alternatives where government will even make more money than even the TV license 36 Ghana cedis, and then every individual would love to pay it, because in that scenario, we will be paying even maybe 8 or 10 cedis instead of 36. So you don't feel it. It will also allow for the broadcasters to have their freedom and the rights guaranteed to them to be able to offer their broadcast services. The thinking should be that we should have the understanding that we are having 2 types of broadcasting. One is a service trying to render a service as media, and one is for pay. And so the thinking that free, literally meaning of free to air is not meaning that it is free as you hear it. What we are saying here as free to air is only to compare to what is pay TV, which is encrypted for someone, and each content type is different. But free to air is for the broadcasters who go for such classification to offer media services. And so these 2 differences should be clear in our minds. But let us work together. There are solutions, and we should not take a position because we have power and say, let us do it. This is what we will do. This is all GIBA is saying.
Thank you, Chief. Crystal. I don't know if it's within my right to invite the president of the GJA to give closing remarks, because if we want to attempt to address these points, we will not be able to. And I feel the questions more point as to what else is needed to be done. So we've taken note of the questions. Gloria is here. She's facilitating. So I'm sure we have a lot of what you've said by way of going forward. So I'm not overruling you, but I feel we have to launch the video. Okay,
So
Inshira,
let's call on Gloria. Here, she's the Executive Secretary
of GIBA.
So there's a campaign,
Yes.
and we're just going to share some information on that.
So please put your hands together for my panel whilst we move back.
Yes.
And then Inshira takes over.
So Gloria will give us a background to these videos, and then we'll play a couple of them. Over to you. I think she deserves a round of applause for walking down here.
Good afternoon, everyone. With all the concerns that have been raised by stakeholders, by the broadcasters, GIBA, together with all the concerned free-to-air TV broadcasters, came together to put together some material in a video, a document. It's not a documentary, it's a short video, sort of, to enable the public get a good understanding of what the issues are. So basically, that is the video, and I hereby declare the video duly launched.
Ghana joins hundreds of countries around the world in moving from analog TV broadcasting to digital TV. You are probably wondering, what has this got to do with me? Everyone currently watching all free-to-air channels on their analog TV set is encouraged to get a certified decoder from an authorized dealer to enable them continue watching sharper, better, and more TV channels in digital quality, or to simply get a digital TV set with no decoder required. National Communications Authority, National Digital Broadcasting Migration Committee, and the Ghana Standards Authority came together to develop a standard for free-to-air digital TV decoders with minimum specifications, which will make the decoders, amongst other things, very affordable to you. You all remember this announcement by the NCA.
If you're in the process of buying a new TV set, buy a digital-ready set. Just look out for the Digital Ghana Conformity logo. Ghana is ready for digital. With my friend Kodigi. Are you ready? To enjoy a world-class viewing experience, get a set-top box for your analog TV or buy a digital-ready set. Look out for the Digital Ghana Conformance logo. It's Digitime in Ghana. Are you ready? This advert is brought to you by the Ministry of Communications.
But the Ministry of Communications is making a U-turn to introduce a technology, the type used in pay TV broadcasting, into every free-to-air decoder, which will block you from watching your favorite TV programs unless you pay a digital access fee. And GIBA is asking why. This technology is sometimes called access control or conditional access. The conditional access is a control mechanism which will scramble your favorite TV programs on your TV set, leaving you the signal with a blank screen. Insisting on this technology for free-to-air broadcasting will have an adverse effect on your fundamental right to freely access information through public service broadcasting. The millions of digital TV sets already certified by the NCA, which have been purchased and installed at individual homes, offices, shops, stores, warehouses, and public places across the country, which are currently receiving digital TV programming, will abruptly stop receiving free-to-air digital TV unless access is enabled by the Ministry of Communications' chosen controller or operator through the opening of a conditional access encryption key. Even so, can't receive free-to-air programs unless you acquire the Ministry's prescribed CA control decoder in addition. In all the countries of the world that have successfully migrated to digital TV, well, they managed to do so without requiring this conditional access technology. Why should you care? The truth is that a decoder with this technology prescribed by the Ministry of Communications will deny you your right to continue watching digital terrestrial television, or will decide for you if you should receive even your free-to-air channels or not. It is your right, our right, to choose what programs to watch. Free-to-air TV should remain free as authorized by the regulator without access control. Free-to-air broadcasting through an intermediary content blocking mechanism, such as the CA, will make mass media communication vulnerable. Reject conditional access for free-to-air TV now. Digital technology is the future of the world. The evil of its application is the doing of men. We are all excited for TV to go digital. Let's make sure we get it right. GIBA is calling on all Ghanaians to wake up and embrace only what is good for us as a people and in accord with the law for the good and growth of our motherland, Ghana. This public service announcement is brought to you by the Ghana Independent Broadcasters Association, GIBA.
From white to red.
Well noted. It gives a better signal, a stronger signal.
So at this point, I'm going to use my license as MC to change a couple of things. We would have had a closing remark from our chairman, and then followed by a vote of thanks. So I'm moving the vote of thanks forward. So we'll thank the chairman in advance. Gloria, over to you to deliver the vote of thanks, and then we'll take the closing as the closing. Another round of applause for her. She's very shy, so, you know.
I'd like to thank you all for coming, especially the members of the diplomatic corps who were here. And then the owners of the various broadcast houses who were able to attend, dignitaries, members of parliament, former minister who was here, the members of the public, everyone who took time off their busy schedule to come join us for this forum. We are indeed very, very grateful and would like to say a huge thank you.
Thank you. So, by extension,
and that has been our live broadcast from the Swiss Spirit Hotel Alisa Suites here in Accra, where the Ghana Independent Broadcasters Association has been discussing Ghana's migration from analog to digital terrestrial television and the future of free-to-air television, basically asking government not to put a cost to that element, free-to-air TV, to make it accessible to everybody. And there was a panel discussion that ended a while ago, and there we got the legal perspective to all of this. Lawyer Ernest Abochi spoke on that. We also had a former NMC chairman, Nana Kwesi John Apinting, sharing his thoughts as well. And we got the international perspective as well from Gregory Bensberg. He's the general manager of Digital 3 and 4 and ITV channels in the UK. Definitely there'll be more on this in subsequent bulletins, and hopefully you have learned something as a consumer or maybe a player in the industry on our role in ensuring that this digital terrestrial television migration is done right. Well, that'll be all from me and the entire team. Do stick with us here on the Joy News channel. There's more shortly.